We will wade, I think, straight in this morning to some of the most fractious territory that we ever explore together. I refer, of course, to the continuing situation in the Middle East as Israel continues its bombardment, attacks, offences against the Palestinian people in Gaza, edging ever closer. In fact, I think most people would accept that the case for collective punishment has been made fairly powerfully, although it doesn't fall to us to reach any verdicts about that. And the comments from Joe Biden over the weekend that I think are really important. The problem is when so many people have been killed, that conversations about the future or about diplomacy or about politics or about philosophy can sometimes feel almost crass, can't they? If I start talking to you about the damage that Netanyahu has done to Israel, its reputational damage moving forward, and you would shout at me, quite rightly, I think, that it is nothing compared to the damage that has been done to the Palestinian people, I wouldn't really have an argument to offer up, except that it also matters. You can't claim that reputational damage to the nation of Israel is as important or as harrowing as 14,000 dead children on the Gaza Strip, and of course counting. But if you want peace in the Middle East, if you want these people to live in harmony, either in a two-state solution or all living side by side. At this point, I think if I said from the river to the sea, I'd be suspended from the Labour Party. I don't know if that's still the state of affairs, unless, of course, I was saying it as a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, in which case it would go absolutely uncriticised and unchallenged by the kind of British politicians quoted in the Daily Telegraph today as going after David Cameron now for not being unstinting in his support of what Israel is doing. I don't know if they used the word themselves or if the Telegraph has merely editorialised it, but that was a moment. There's two things I told you that were going to happen, and I really, really wish that I'd been wrong. The first was that I told you eventually this will crystallise into unquestioning and unwavering support for anything that Israel does, up to and including plausible war crimes. It kind of had to. After that first month, when we all used words like proportionate and disproportionate and self-defense, and we were policed very robustly if we didn't add after every call for peace in Palestine or peace in Gaza, if we didn't add immediately, and also we desperately want to see the hostages released as well. It became like a sort of, almost like a purity check upon rhetoric, and I'm not sure how helpful it was, but for the avoidance of any doubt, literally nobody sensible or decent who wants people in Gaza to stop being killed doesn't also want Israeli hostages, however many are left, however many haven't now been killed by the Israeli bombardments, to be released. I thought goes without saying. Do you know what? I still think it goes without saying. But if people are determined to pretend that not saying it somehow speaks of a more significant issue, then I am happy to meet their pretenses head on and reflect repeatedly the obviousness that calling for peace entails calling for the release of hostages. But you've got 30,000 dead people now, 30,000 dead humans, and if it's crass to suggest that Israel has hurt itself in its pursuit of, vengeance, or Hamas, or perhaps both, then it's probably also crass to suggest that the release of hostages can balance out on some sort of celestial scales the continuing killing of 14,000 children and counting. So the two things I said to you would happen have happened now. The first was that eventually all of the, and I don't know what words are best to use here because I don't know who really takes offence at this. If anyone knows how easy it is for people to take offence at a bloke on the radio being proved right about stuff, then it's me. But I don't know how you can take offence at this. Is that in the immediate aftermath of that disgusting attack on October the 7th, the case that Israel must do something and could perhaps do anything was pretty hard to resist. But it became clear pretty quickly that the hopes of a proportionate response were rash, were vain, and that Netanyahu was hell-bent upon a course that would please some of the members of his own cabinet including, at least one cabinet minister who's been convicted effectively of terrorist support. In order to keep them sweet, he would flirt with the kind of characters that were saying we should drop a nuclear bomb on the Gaza Strip, or we should raze it to the ground, or we should eradicate all of them. So the notion that it would be in any way measured or stinting or proportionate seemed to disappear fairly quickly. And what replaces it? Well, you have two choices at that time. You either do what I do, which is adjust your attitude as the facts change. Well, ask the questions like, how many dead is too many? Ask the questions like, where do they go? Ask the questions like, what is the end game? And realize that in the absence of proper answers to those questions, you have to change your attitude. Or you don't change your attitude. That's option 2. And if you don't change your attitude, then you move from saying it must be proportionate, it must be measured, it is justified, it's self-defense, and then you watch what's happened subsequently, and it's none of those things. You have to, and this I think is where a lot of the media machinations coming out of Israel have been very successful. You have to go to a place where you say they can do whatever they want. Israel can do whatever they want. Netanyahu can do whatever he wants. The cause is sufficiently just. The grievance is sufficiently great. The wound is sufficiently raw to justify Benjamin Netanyahu killing an unspecified number, or rather the army that answers to him killing an unspecified number of Palestinian people. And I don't think you can argue with me yet about the obviousness of that being where we are now. We are now divided. Those of us who have an interest in the issue, whether we have skin in the game or not, we are now essentially divided between anybody who recognized the necessity and rectitude of Israel responding robustly and militarily to the terror attack of last October. We are now divided into two camps, aren't we? We are now divided into you can go too far and you have, versus you can't go too far, so you won't. That's it, right? That you either accept that Israel can go too far and almost certainly has, or you argue that Israel cannot go too far. And that takes us back to late October of 2023, when callers would ring in and balk almost at the question of how many deaths is too many deaths. And I don't know about you, but my goodness me, I heard the echoes. I heard that question resonating through my mind when I heard Joe Biden's comments this weekend. Remember that question that I think became a really pivotal point in our pondering of these issues, our conversations about these issues. How many dead is too many? Is it 10,000? Is it 20,000? Is it 200,000? How many dead is too many dead? At what point does the world turn around and say, enough? And now listen to Joe Biden this weekend.
What's happening is he has a right to defend Israel, a right to continue to pursue Hamas, but he must pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost as a consequence of the actions taken. He's hurting, in my view, he's hurting Israel more than helping Israel by making the rest of the world, it's contrary to what Israel stands for. And I think it's a big mistake. So I want to see a ceasefire.
And there it is, really. Biden concluding that 30,000 is too many. There's another clip I saw at the weekend where he actually said he can't kill another, or they can't kill another 30,000 people. So 30 minutes after 10 is the time. That was the second thing I told you that would happen. In that partly because of Netanyahu's personality and partly because of his political jeopardy, the damage eventually being done, or the damage is too mild a word, isn't it? But the deaths in Gaza would eventually start damaging Israel on the world stage, and I think that's happened now. We've touched on this already together, and it is one of those subjects where I can upset everybody and nobody at the same time. When I tell you, as I told you right at the very beginning, no one is going to make me care more about a dead Israeli than I do about a dead Palestinian, and nobody's going to make me care more about a dead Palestinian than I do about a dead Israeli. And I appreciate how furious that makes some people feel, how obvious it is to some people that Israeli lives are worth less than Palestinian lives, or that Palestinian lives are worth less than Israeli lives. And I'm carefully not bringing religion into it, although you've probably heard it silently spoken anyway. But I refuse. I'm not joining that game. However desperate the importuning may be, however vile the insults may be, I do not care more about a dead Israeli than I do about a dead Palestinian, and I do not and will never care more about a dead Palestinian than I do about a dead Israeli. And if you want peace, then you want Israel to be respected and even perhaps revered on the world stage. And my fear is, like Joe Biden's, that Benjamin Netanyahu has now done more harm to the Israeli cause, generationally speaking, moving forward, than I believed on October the 7th, perhaps naively, was even possible. So that's the question for you. Do you know what I mean would be really nice and is almost certainly impossible? Is to hear from people who didn't have opinions, never mind strong opinions, didn't really know what was going on, knew nothing of the history of, well, that's a little bit naive, he must have known something, but who, if we were to go back to the 8th of October of last year, people who didn't have an emotional investment in either peoples, the Israeli people or the Palestinian people. I mean a sort of form of impartiality, a lack of bias, a sort of perhaps just built upon a lack of engagement, a lack of understanding. So people whose knowledge of the broader issue has grown with every passing month. Because I think that the test of whether Joe Biden is right, the test of whether Joe Biden is right and Netanyahu is now hurting Israel, the test is really in the minds of the people who didn't have, people like me actually, who didn't have an entrenched support, in quotes, for either side, in quotes, at the beginning of this, who recognized the abhorrence of the Hamas terror attack, and who felt that there was a line over which Benjamin Netanyahu could subsequently go. And I think he's gone. I think he's gone way past it. 10,000 people protesting his resignation, wanting him to go on the streets of Tel Aviv this weekend. And more arrests there, I think, than there were among the reported 400,000 people protesting for peace on the streets of London. I mean, and yet, of course, the Conservative government remains committed to the idea that the protests on the streets of London are the major problem in the current context. So 17 minutes after 10 is the time. Is Joe Biden right? And listen, I'm by no means excluding you if you've got strong views on this and have had strong views from the start, but I will find you just more interesting if they are capable of changing a bit. Is Joe Biden right? Is Netanyahu now, with the obvious caveat that reputational damage is not as serious or as profound as death, whether it's the 1,200 killed on October the 7th or the 30,000 and growing killed since in Gaza, but is Joe Biden right that Israel's, what would the word be, Israel's maneuvers have damaged Israel in the eyes of the rest of the world? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. And just to not necessarily keep things light, we'd like to thank George for telling me in a text to 84850, it may even be a WhatsApp, that it is a waste of time pretending that I don't have entrenched support for Israel. And I'd like to thank David for calling me anti-Semitic. So there are two people, George and David, who've listened to the same 15 minutes of radio that you've listened to, and one thinks that I am here shilling for the Israeli government, probably at the behest of my Jewish paymasters, am I right? And the other thinks I'm anti-Semitic. So that's how I derive supreme confidence in the objectivity of my position. And from that objective position, I agree with Joe Biden. This is hurting Israel now. Do you agree with him?